Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Hamilton, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a very special episode here on Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm being joined by my fellow blonde sister in arms around sugar. Danielle Hamilton is here back on the show. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
Hi, fellow Danny. I'm very excited to be here. It's like, remember at the beginning, people kept messing us up, like Sugar Danny. Yes. It's like, she's the other Sugar Danny with the blonde hair.
We have both received messages on Instagram and email with people completely mixing us up, and we have a lot of laughs over that. And it is long overdue to have you back on the show. I cannot believe it. Danny and I have known each other for many years now and have been collaborating both as friends and as, experts in the sugar space. And you came on the show, episode 3 was the first episode that you were on the show. So if anyone wants to definitely go back and listen to that, that was actually, at the time of recording this, it's the 3rd highest downloaded episode still on my podcast. So obviously it's a great one that you should listen to. And today we're going to kind of take it a little bit of a different direction and build off of what you already shared here in episode 3. But I know we talk a lot about, obviously here, the mindset, spirituality, the deeper healing, emotions, and it's definitely needed, the piece that you bring to the puzzle here around the physicality of what the heck is going on with our blood sugar, right? And when we eat sugar and the very physical aspects that are keeping us addicted and sick and all that roller coaster that we're going to dive in today. So before we get any deeper into that, Danny, because it's been so long since you've been on the show, why don't you share a little bit about your background? What is it? What's your journey? I know you have a really powerful health and healing journey, and what kind of got you inspired into doing the work that you're doing now? And incredible.
Yeah. So my story started in childhood, just to start there, where it really began, of being this person who I would describe. I always used to say I have a sweet tooth. I would eat a lot of processed breakfast foods. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so that meant a lot of low-fat, ultra-processed foods. And if it was like a breakfast food, it had my name on it: cereals, toaster strudels, all those good things. I remember I was rehashing what my lunch used to be. It was a yogurt, like a low-fat, fruit yogurt with granola on top, and a low-fat granola bar, and some sort of Capri Sun, and a fruit cup in high fructose corn syrup. And I'm like, no wonder why I had blood sugar problems. I didn't know any of this, though. So I was a pretty sickly kid, and I had a lot of ear infections and a lot of strep throat, and I got allergies and asthma, and had all these really intense issues, was having all these shots and inhalers and prescriptions. And then I finally found the paleo diet, and it reversed all these health conditions that I had. It was amazing. But then I was eating this way, and I guess my sweet tooth from the standard American diet really transferred over to the paleo diet. Like, sugar really wasn't on my radar. I just knew that I liked sweets, and that it was kind of a battle between me and the sweets. But I never really went much deeper than that. And so I was eating all this healthy, whole food, and I started to get all these hormonal issues. And I was like, okay, this diet just healed me in so many ways. Now what's happening? So I started to I would wake up at like 11 in the morning, which was super late for me. I used to be up with the sun. I would be really tired all day. I missed my periods for 6 months. I wasn't getting a period. I had always struggled with acne, but now this was like all over my cheeks and all over my forehead. I mean, it was really, really bad. And when I did have my period, I had terrible cramps, terrible PMS, PMDD, and I was really, really struggling. And then I started gaining weight, and I was like, how did this diet that just healed me make me so sick? Like, I couldn't understand what was going on. So I finally figured out I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I was really searching for the root of that issue, because I thought that's what was causing all of these symptoms. And so I was trying to impact my hormones and take the Vitex and the DIM and the saw palmetto, like all these things to try to impact my hormones. and it wasn't making a dent. And I was looking up what are the recommendations for diet, and it said don't have gluten, dairy, or refined sugar. I was like, oh, check, check, check. I'm doing paleo. I'm not eating any of those. So I guess I'll just paleo harder. And of course that didn't work. So it was years before I finally heard someone say PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries, and that statement just completely changed my life, because it shone this light on the fact that something to do with blood sugar was impacting my hormones. And I had really never paid attention to blood sugar. In fact, I did the complete opposite. I actively avoided learning about blood sugar because it was boring, it was hard to understand, and I didn't think it involved me because I didn't have diabetes, so I didn't think I had to pay attention. So I actively avoided learning about that. I remember skipping that chapter in this book I have right back here called Practical Paleo, and I remember being like, blood sugar, that's confusing, just skip the chapter. Like, I was learning about all these things about my health, but I was like, I'm going to glaze over if someone starts talking about insulin, And then meanwhile, it's what is really, really impacting me. So once I realized, okay, they're telling me I have this diabetes of the ovaries, I have some sort of progressed issue with blood sugar, but there had to have been some signs that I might have missed, like if I look back. And so I had to learn what those signs were, because I had no idea what they were. And it dawned on me that all of these things that I thought were personality traits were actually blood sugar issues. So when I said, I don't have a sweet tooth, all my teeth are sweet. Having a sweet tooth, describing yourself like that is a symptom of blood sugar issues. I used to struggle with binge eating. For me, that was my symptom of blood sugar issues. I used to describe myself as a breakfast person because when I woke up, I would be shaky and I would say, I'm just a breakfast person, I need to eat breakfast. Well, no, that was a blood sugar crash. And and that's why you need to eat breakfast so badly. I used to think I can't tolerate a lot of caffeine because after I would drink coffee, I'd get shaky again. And eventually I checked my blood sugar. It was very low after the coffee. Again, a blood sugar crash. I used to be a person who hated being hungry. I couldn't stand being hungry. And so I would intuitively just be snacking and grazing all day to prevent myself from feeling what wasn't hunger, but rather a blood sugar crash. I would find myself eating before I left the house all the time, even if it was to go out to eat. And then I realized one day I caught myself, I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, we're going to eat. Why are you eating now? And it was because I was so afraid to feel that hunger. Heaven forbid it took a long time to get seated or it took a long time for the food to come out. I couldn't handle that feeling in my body. It felt really, really bad. And I was also a person who would look at people who said, like, oh my gosh, I think I forgot to eat lunch. I'm like, what? Like, no way I could miss a meal. There's just no way on God's green earth could I think about missing a meal and then forgetting about it. No way. I just would turn into a different person. I would turn into Joe Pesci on the Snickers commercials back in the 90s, or in the early 2000s. Like, that was me. I turned into a different person when I was hungry, like being the hangry person, getting irritable when you're hungry. Surprisingly, that's not a personality trait. A lot of people think it is. It's like, oh, my daughter inherited my hangriness. And it's like, it's the blood sugar dysregulation causing this. And I was also, the last one was that I was also that girl with the granola bar in her purse all the time. And then when I went paleo, it turned into being like a Laura bar, which is like a fruit and nut bar, not oats or something. But I still never left the house without food. I was always thinking about my next meal. And what you said earlier when you said, like, you do the deep work and get behind the thoughts and emotions, what I found and what I learned from you and then my own experience, when we look at these things together, I really can see how this blood sugar dysregulation was driving so many of my thoughts and behaviors and emotions, and how it was so powerful once I got that to quiet down. So I call it my sugar dragon. And my sugar dragon lives inside of me, and he will never go away. He could just be dormant, but he can wake up. And so I find that my sugar dragon is very active when I'm having this blood sugar dysregulation, and it drives me to make these other decisions. So recently, just a little aside, some companies send me food and they're like, oh, we have this cereal for you. It's glyphosate free, it's organic, it's gluten free, it's grain free, it's everything free. It's amazing, right? And so I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So I try this cereal after having a full meal, so I didn't have it on an empty stomach. And I got such a bad blood sugar spike from that cereal. And at the very peak of the spike, all of a sudden I heard this voice come into my head that was not my own. And it was like, you should go get more cereal. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did not think that. I did not think that. That was not my voice. And it was like, you should go get more cereal. Do we have chocolate? Maybe you should go get ice cream. It was like, what is happening? I felt completely that my mind was taken over, and I was like controlled so heavily by the sugar dragon, who hasn't been active in my life in a very long amount of time. So it was really interesting to hear that difference between my inner voice and my sugar dragon's inner voice. And I just think that knowing about the physiology piece can and dialing that part in really makes our work so much more, I would say, so much easier. And just, it's like putting this really solid foundation on, instead of trying to like build a second story when, the house is on stilts, right? And so the work that we do is so complementary, and I think it's so important to do. And I think that if people haven't thought about this concept of their blood sugar yet, that it is something that's so profound, that can so profoundly change everything, because our blood sugar affects every single cell, organ, and process in the body. So if our blood sugar is not working for us, it's really working against us in a big way. So I'll pause there and let you dive in.
Yeah. Wow. As we're being joined by a little kitty cat here. Hey, he wants to say something on the mic. Yeah, Danny, thank you so much for sharing your story again. And just, wow, you've been through so much. And I think, my audience can really understand. I know I can definitely relate to the hanger, and that like almost like you're possessed, right? Like there's something inside you that is not really you, that's controlling your every decision, right? Whether or not you go to a certain restaurant, well, is there going to be like my sugar hit there, right? Or whether or not you go to someone's house, like just all these little things, right? I can't be too far away from a convenience store or a vending machine where I can get my fix if I need it. Like the obsession, right? And with anything in life, that obsessive behavior is a big red flag. And I know you and I have both been through that. And I think a lot of my listeners are probably nodding their heads to a lot of what you were saying, going, oh my goodness, that's not just a genetic thing that I'm hangry all the time and that I wake up. I was the same. I had to eat within like 15 minutes of waking up, or I would be panicking, like, where am I going to get breakfast? And yeah, like that obsession is so, and then the anxiety that gets produced by that, right? I mean, there's so many levels to it. So I think you already covered this. That was one of my questions, was just and maybe you could just hit it quick bullet point again, because I think this is really important for my audience and anybody listening is, ground level, how does someone actually know that they have blood sugar issues? Because there's a lot of, and we're going to talk about that, hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia, reactive hypoglycemia. We're going to talk about, metabolic dysfunction, all the things, right? There's a lot of ways that our blood sugar can be, problematic or troubled, right? Or out of balance. So how, what do you see as the most common symptoms for people that, and especially those ones that people might just be blowing off as, something else, right? Like, like you were, right? Oh, that has nothing to do with sugar, right? I don't want to read that chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that, the red flags for people to really pay attention to?
Yeah, so the first signs of blood sugar issues start to show up when you're either hungry or when a meal is a little delayed. And that's when you start to really notice that our metabolism isn't as efficient as it used to be. So just to rewind a little bit, just so, because I'll allude to this moving forward, what's really important is that we understand that our bodies are built like hybrid cars. We should be able to burn sugar and fat for fuel, and we should also be able to burn stored sugar that's in our liver. It's called glycogen when it's there. And then our stored body fat. So we should be able to access these backup fuels very easily. That's why our body stores excess energy as body fat, right? First, it stores a bunch of sugar in the liver, so it could just, balance it out as it needs to, no big deal. And then when that's used up, it should be able to go into our own body fat and become energized with this endless, basically, source of energy that we have on us. We have thousands and thousands of calories of fat stored on our bodies. And so we can go for long periods of time. As human beings, were designed to go long periods of time if they needed to without eating. So that's how our body is built. But what starts to happen is we live in this society where, the standard American diet is now a worldwide thing. And we were told to snack and, have snacks 6 times a day or eat 6 times a day, eat these small meals to keep your metabolism going. We were told to, don't eat too much at a time, but like keep eating all day long. And we have been sold food that is very highly refined and very high in carbohydrates. And when we refine a food, it basically just spikes our blood sugar much, much higher and much faster. And so we're spiking our blood sugar constantly. And what that does is it starts to raise insulin levels in our blood. And insulin, don't glaze over. It's easy. We're going to get it. Insulin is a hormone that takes the sugar out of the blood. So it lowers the blood sugar and it puts that sugar into the body cells where it needs to go so it can make energy. So the insulin is taking the glucose by the hand and saying, hey, like, go into this muscle cell, go into the brain cell, go into a liver cell or a heart. So that's how our body makes energy, right? And so we need this insulin, but these high levels, they start to build up over time because we're spiking our blood sugar over and over and over. And then the insulin takes a while to come down. So when we have high levels of insulin, here's where it gets interesting. The insulin blocks our body from utilizing the stored sugar in our liver or from utilizing our own body fat, because the insulin is a hormone and hormones are signalers. And so this signal that this insulin is sending our body is to store fat. So it's not going to allow us to be in a fat burning mode, like, hey, let's use this to burn and energize yourself and lose some body fat. It won't allow you to do that because the message it's getting is we need to be storing. We need to be storing this for later. And so those high insulin levels block our body from using the stored fuel. So then what fuel do we have? We only have the fuel that's coming in at meal times. So what starts to happen is that we'll eat a meal. Let's say we have a breakfast and we have like oatmeal or something. We'll use up that energy from the meal, and now we're stuck. We don't have anything left. So once that gets burned off, then our blood sugar will start ticking down, and here's where the liver should come in and be like, here, I have some sugar for you, but the insulin is blocking that from happening. So now the blood sugar is ticking down and the brain is like, I'm not getting enough energy. And so it starts to panic. And so it starts sending you symptoms like anxiety, irritability, dizziness, lightheadedness, shakiness, weakness, fatigue, brain fog, difficulty concentrating, irritability, hunger, and then cravings. We start to get hungry. We start to get urgently hungry. The hunger that can't be put off, like, I need to eat right now. Like, I'm pulling through the drive-thru. Where's the nearest Starbucks? Get me my purse. I need the granola bar. That is that urgency because the body is sensing an energy crisis because the blood sugar is going down and it has no backup source. So when the backup source goes away, that's when we start to see the earliest signs of these blood sugar issues.
Yeah.
And again, these are happening usually between meals or around mealtime. And so what starts to happen, because our blood sugar affects every cell, organ, and process in our body, is that unfortunately either the blood sugar spikes, so the body doesn't like when the blood sugar spikes too high. It also doesn't like when it crashes down too low. It likes it in that nice, neat Goldilocks position. So if we're having spikes and or crashes, it's very stressful to the body. It automatically will start sending out inflammatory molecules. That's where it really affects a lot of blood vessels in our body. And so we get that's where atherosclerosis comes in, is a lot of times from these blood sugar spikes. It messes with our heart and it drives cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure. So that was what we talked about on episode 3. So how it's hitting all these bodily systems. And so it'll start to impact more and more body systems as it gets worse. So I had a lot of hormonal issues. Some other people might get migraines. Some other people might have memory loss. Like that brain fog now is like almost a permanent memory issue. In general, just inflammation. So I had a lot of tendinitis. Who would have thought fixing my blood sugar would heal my ankle tendinitis? But it does, because the inflammatory component of these blood sugar spikes, when we get rid of that, we can heal those inflammatory type symptoms. It impacts our gut, and then it impacts our liver. It impacts our adrenals big time. And so that's where we get a lot of these people tending towards that lower blood sugar. So I know you mentioned the hypoglycemia as something we're going to be talking about. And this is a lot of times what I talk about with people, because I feel like this is really missed. It's missed oftentimes. Yeah. It's missed by doctors. So when I was hypoglycemic, I went to my doctor and my blood sugar was 60. So if you want to divide that by 18 and tell us the millimoles, sorry.
Math.
Yeah, I'll get it. I'll get it.
Math.
So it's 3.3. So that's pretty low blood sugar, right? So if my blood sugar was 3.3 or 60 milligrams per deciliter, that is very low. And I was going in there. I was super shaky. I was very lightheaded. And this happened 3 times in the year. My blood sugar was either 60 or 63 all 3 times that I went. Not one doctor said anything to me about it, because they're like, oh, great. It's under 100. This is perfect. And meanwhile, it is not perfect, because what we often find is that hypoglycemia, where the blood sugar is going low or staying low, it ends up being that this is what drives the higher blood sugar. Because what happens when your blood sugar goes low? What are you inclined to do? You are inclined to go eat sugar and get it back up.
Ice cream for sure. Yeah,
exactly. So the hypoglycemia really drives us to go get something to eat and quickly. It's not making us think like, I have a really good grass-fed steak in the fridge. I'm going to grill that up with some local seasonal broccoli. No, it's like, give me the fastest thing ever and give me a coffee, give me something to get my blood sugar back up. So then over time, we're continuing on that blood sugar roller coaster. We're spiking our blood sugar more and more. And over time, the line of our blood sugar, as we can see on like a continuous glucose monitor, it will start to rise, because now we're having more and more insulin resistance, where the insulin has a harder time of getting the sugar out of the blood into the body cells. So the sugar in the blood is starting to build up. But no matter where you are on this spectrum of blood sugar issues, whether you're hypo, where the blood sugar is lower, or you have prediabetes or diabetes, when the fasting blood sugar just starts to just be higher and it's not going down, within that we can still experience symptoms of low blood sugar. And so this is what a lot of people end up thinking if they're not testing their blood sugar. What it starts to feel like is like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling the panicky, I'm shaky, I'm anxious, I need to go eat something, my blood sugar is low. But what I'm finding happens is that with people with more and more progressed insulin resistance, so these are going to be people with prediabetes and diabetes, is that they're still feeling the lows, but the lows are now happening in the normal range or even in a high range. And this often leads to gaslighting from doctors or from yourself, because you'll test your blood sugar and be like, oh, my blood sugar is 5.5. It's like 100. Like, it's totally normal. Then this can't be my blood sugar, why I'm feeling dizzy and anxious and all these things. But in actuality, if you were to have a continuous glucose monitor on and you were to look, what you would probably find is that there would be this downward trend of your blood sugar. And the faster our blood sugar changes in any direction, the worse we're going to feel. But then also, for some people, the way I like to describe what sort of happens over time with the hypoglycemia thing, where we're getting these sort of false lows, is like, let's say I'm in this room right now, temperature feels totally fine, I'm in a tank top, right? Let's say I go take a really hot shower for 15 minutes, I come back into this room, all of a sudden I feel freezing. I have to put on a sweater, I have to turn the heat up. The temperature in the room did not change, but my body's set point started to change. So that's sort of what starts to happen now as your blood sugar sits higher and higher, where now the doctor might be concerned because it's too high. When the blood sugar starts dropping and it drops into a normal range, it's relatively too low for where your body is used to having it. So it starts to feel, you start to get all these exact same symptoms, and it drives you to do the exact same thing, which is eat the sugar. So one of the things that I saw happen was with one of my clients who was in my program last time. She said that she had had hypoglycemia since she's been in high school. She's now retired. So we are talking decades have passed of her having hypoglycemia. So we put a blood glucose monitor on her, a CGM, and we expected to see low blood sugar numbers around that 60, 50, 3.3-ish range, right? We expected to see those lows. When we put her blood sugar monitor on, she thought the machine was broken because she was spiking up to the 300s and her lows were 160. It did not go below 160, which is quite high. Dan, if you want to do the math for us on that, just divide by 18. But thank you.
8.8.
8 yeah. So having a low of 8.8, I mean, all that glucose is very well into the type 2 diabetic range. Like, this is very, very progressed. But what her blood sugar graph looked like was these ups and downs, just like a roller coaster. And so she was feeling the symptoms of the lows, but was not actually low. And so it just created that pattern, and it drove her to have this type 2 diabetes and of course the doctors missed it. And it's really sad to see that, because now it's much more progressed. And so luckily in 8 weeks, we were able to get her out of the diabetic range, and she's now in almost even out of the pre-diabetic range, which is amazing. So it's unbelievable how fast the body can heal. But it was a big problem for her, because when we talk about how do we typically treat blood sugar issues, oftentimes we talk about we have to start lowering some of those carbohydrates. We have to not eat as often. So that means cutting out the snacking. And we try to do some intermittent fasting, so maybe push that dinner up a little bit, and exercising and building muscle. But a big problem for a lot of people with hypoglycemia and reactive hypoglycemia is that their blood sugar has been crashing so much that their adrenals have had to step in so often and just pump them with stress hormones, because we have all these kind of checks and balances in our body so we don't die. If our blood sugar were 0, we would be dead. So we have a lot of backup mechanisms to make sure our blood sugar stays in a healthy range. But a lot of those include the adrenals producing stress hormones, which creates new blood sugar. So imagine someone whose blood sugar is crashing all the time, and now how often the adrenals have to step in and pump you with stress hormones. P.S. This often happens in the middle of the night, and people think that they're having a panic attack, but really it's a blood sugar crash that's making you be filled with stress hormones, and you wake up and your heart is pounding because your adrenals just dumped a ton of epinephrine, which is adrenaline. So that's been happening over time, and now the adrenals are really just struggling to keep your blood sugar in balance. Yeah. And so it becomes a really, really big issue.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I want to pause you there because that was a lot. That was a lot. And I encourage everybody to listen to this again, because everything you just shared is so profound and information that none of us are taught or learned. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors don't know. So this is really, really powerful, and hopefully supports all of us in being empowered in supporting our body, right? And long-term health, and understanding that the root of a lot of our mental health disorders and anxiety and struggles with sugar could simply be this, right? I mean, it's not simple, but could be a lot of exactly what you're talking about. So I would love for you to explain, you've touched on it a few times kind of loosely, but I think this is really important because many listeners and many people will be going and doing their annual tests, right, at their doctor, right? And you said doctors usually miss this stuff. You threw out, obviously, we've been doing a little bit of fun math, but can you share a little bit of like, what are people used to seeing in terms of, the annual, blood sugar check that they get, what those numbers actually mean, and where maybe our traditional system is not really giving a full accurate picture? And then how can we actually get an accurate picture? I mean, are CGMs the only way, or are there other ways that we can actually get a better insight, maybe different tests that we can run? So yeah, talk a little bit about testing and helping people sort of navigate those confusing, blood test results that we'll get back, on our annual checkup.
Yeah, great question. So I do happen to have a graphic with both the milligrams per deciliter, what we use here in the States, and then the millimoles that we use outside of the States. So I have all the numbers here that you guys will need. So basically, every time you go to the doctor for your annual checkup, they will usually take a fasting glucose. And that can be helpful, but it is really one snapshot in time. So it doesn't tell us everything. But the doctor will say that the range of 100 or 5.6 to 70, which is 3.8, is normal. And I don't agree with that. I agree there's optimal, and then it gets a little bit suboptimal. So I personally use the range of 70 to 85 or 3.8 to 4.7 as being optimal fasting blood glucose. So this is where you're fasting overnight and then you go into the office and get the test. So I look at those ranges as optimal. Above 85, so 86 to 99, which is 4.8 to 5.5, I look at that as the doctor will be like, oh, it's perfect. And I will guarantee that if your fasting blood sugar is in that range, I would say about 95% of the time, you are already going to be showing symptoms of blood sugar dysregulation. And oftentimes it's because our insulin can be dysregulated or getting higher in the blood for decades before the blood sugar even moves at all, before we even see a change in our blood sugar. So we're going to talk about insulin in a second, but that is often why. So the insulin resistance has started to progress enough to even move the blood sugar. So there's probably going to be issues there. With the ranges for prediabetes and diabetes, I do default to what the doctors say. So 100 to 125 is prediabetes, and that's 5.6 to 6.9. And then 126 and above, or 7 millimoles and above, would be the diabetic range. Keep in mind, I am a nutritional therapy practitioner. I do not diagnose or treat any diseases. So this is just for informational purposes only. Fasting blood sugar is not a single solitary criteria. It's not enough of a criteria to be diagnosed with these issues. And these things can change so quickly that you're not stuck where you are. So let it give you an idea of like, okay, I have some work to do, or I have a lot of work to do. But don't get comfortable there, because that's going to change. And it's something that we have so much control over. The other end of the spectrum is what I talked about earlier, which is hypoglycemia, which is often not even listed on these types of ranges. If you're looking at a website that's talking to you about blood sugar ranges. So with hypoglycemia, this is where it's a little bit confusing. So we can say that below 70 or 3.8 millimoles is hypoglycemic. However, there are very healthy people who are doing a ketogenic diet and their blood sugar can actually go pretty low, and they're running on an alternative fuel source, which is ketones. So their blood sugar can go low without them feeling bad. And so they might have a low fasting blood glucose, but be totally fine. So they wouldn't be considered hypoglycemic. And then you have those people where their blood sugar might be in that optimal range between 70 and 85, and they feel terrible. They feel like they're going to pass out. So I would say that they're probably still hypoglycemic, even though their blood sugar isn't really showing it at the moment. And again, this is what doctors are missing. So that's the fasting blood sugar. Any questions on that, Dan?
No, that I think that's pretty clear. So that's usually this. I mean, for everybody listening, right? Like that's the standard test that your doctor will give you.
Yeah. And there's one.
What else
more.
Can we do?
Yeah. So then there's another one that we usually get, which is the HbA1c. So it stands for hemoglobin A1c, and usually the doctors will say this is the same for everybody. If I'm I have to default to my chart here, A1C chart. So if your levels are between if they're below 5.6, that's where they're considered normal. Again, I think that the optimal range is much tighter than that. So I would put it at about like a 4.7 to a 5.2-ish as being a little bit more optimal. So give or take. And then for, again, the pre-diabetes range would be 5.7 to 6.4, and then diabetes would be above 6.5. But what is A1C? A1C is an average of your glucose levels over the past 3 months. So think about averages. Think about what I was talking earlier about with the blood sugar highs and lows. So we have highs and we have lows. What happens to an average of highs and lows? It looks
pretty
perfect.
good. Yeah. Great number.
Yeah, exactly. So if someone is coming in with a lot of the highs and lows, which is called glycemic variability, their A1C could be perfect. And sometimes if someone has hypoglycemia, they'll see their A1C get worse before, as they heal. So this is not these two metrics even together are not sensitive enough to pick up a lot of issues. What they are able to do is pick up people who have progressed enough blood sugar to where they land in the pre-diabetic and diabetic range. So these numbers can pick up pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, but they cannot rule out that there's not something else going on. So I mentioned the fasting insulin or the insulin test. This is another metric that your doctor will not test for. Even if you ask, they still may not test for it because they'll say, that's not important. You don't need that. You're not a type 2 diabetic. They will gaslight you. They will make you feel stupid. And I personally think it's because they don't know what to do with this information. They don't know how to interpret it. And there are no drugs that you can give that will lower this number. So they are not trained to look at this information the way that I'm looking at it. So it's not that doctors are bad people. It's that the system in which they're trained in is broken and garbage. So anyway, we won't go into that. That's a whole
that's
other
another
podcast.
episode.
So when we look at fasting insulin, we typically want to see the range be somewhere around 2 to 5 or like below 5. But if you look at the paper that you get, it'll say the range is 2 to 20. That is very progressed insulin resistance at that point. So that could be something that you can get to see, okay, I feel like I'm having blood sugar issues. My blood sugar keeps coming back normal. My doctor says everything's fine. I don't feel fine. I feel kind of dizzy. I'm having these cravings. I'm anxious, blah, blah, blah. Get a fasting insulin test. See what that tells you. It might have these higher insulin levels on there. The other thing is that there's this category of people with what we call reactive hypoglycemia. This is where their blood sugar is crashing after a meal. Oftentimes they're getting too much insulin at a meal, or the body has too much insulin in circulation. It's just putting away too much sugar. And so they get crashes. Sometimes they can fast in the morning and be totally fine, and then once they eat, that's when it all goes to hell, basically. So that's when they start crashing and they can't keep up with it. So there are some people who have this reactive hypoglycemia where their body is actually too sensitive to insulin. So that's where it's like the body's just putting away too much sugar. It's almost too good at responding to all this insulin. And that's usually driven by some sort of gut issue, some sort of infection that is driving up this stuff called lipopolysaccharide, which is basically inflammatory bacteria poop that shouldn't be there, but it can impact us negatively. So that's when some people might see this normal range, but they're still having these big swings. That might be at play there. So it's really helpful to see some of these numbers, but then the gold standard is putting on one of these continuous glucose monitors. In the States, you need a prescription to get them, but there's a bunch of companies that will have doctors and allow you to get the devices. You got them in Canada. I hear you can get them in Costco. Yeah, you can go to Costco and get them, not here in the States. So, but putting on a continuous glucose monitor is an amazing way to start connecting your symptoms with what the heck your blood sugar is doing. So what I found was all of a sudden, if I didn't have my CGM on when I had that cereal, I absolutely 100%, 10 times out of 10, would have had another bowl of that cereal. Because I actually did that another time before I had the CGM on. So I would have had it, right? I would have gone ahead and done that, but instead I went for a power walk so I could get my blood sugar down to a normal level because I wasn't feeling well. So all of a sudden you can start looking, after this meal, like this is when I usually feel pretty tired, and like I always crave something in the afternoons, or I get a headache or something like that. Something that we can typically sort of self-medicate with carbs and sugar and caffeine or ibuprofen or sleeping pills, or, we self-medicate a lot of blood sugar symptoms. And so instead of that self-medication, we can get deeply curious and be like, what's my blood sugar doing? And say, oh my gosh, my blood sugar is actually dropping really fast, and that's why I'm feeling like X. Or surprisingly, I get cravings when my blood sugar gets to the peak of a spike, which is very interesting. I still don't know the science behind that, but at the highest point in that spike, if I spike my blood sugar, that's when I tend to have cravings, and I will want to give into those cravings. So what will happen is it'll probably start coming down and then go up again. So I can't imagine how many people are having these giant mountain ranges of blood sugar, and they just don't know how much it's impacting their physiology.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And without a graph, right, we can't see anything, right? Exactly. And it's really hard to understand what's going on. And that's what I love. I'm long overdue for another CGM. I did one a while ago, and it was so insightful to just see and to start awareness. I mean, everything that we're doing here, everybody listening, right, is about awareness of why your symptoms showing up, where are they showing up, when are they showing up, like what foods are you more sensitive to, right? And understanding your unique body within, this is just such a tool to take our power back, right? To understanding our bodies versus some arbitrary numbers that really aren't, like you explained, comprehensive from the testing that we do have available. I know it's just here, in Canada and in the US. And for anybody who's willing to invest in their health, right, is to actually put in some of this effort to get that, get that graph for a month and just see, what information you can get from that. And it's mind blowing. I learned a lot, and it's amazing accountability for a lot of people too. I know you mentioned that.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
Okay, I know what this is going to do, so I better go out for a walk, right? Or do good. This is so helpful, Danny. I can't believe, this has been a lot of information, and I just want to be cautious of everybody's time and your time, of course. So are there any final tidbits that you feel haven't been shared, or maybe even a takeaway here for people to start making change? I mean, obviously, the easy thing is just stop eating sugar, right? Or minimize your sugar consumption, or go get a CGM. But are there some steps that people can maybe, or what are your top tips to really start getting a clearer picture and starting to shift the needle into more of a healthier, blood sugar regulation?
Yeah, great tips. So a lot of people start with, I need to lower my sugar. And it doesn't work like that. It as I'm sure you've all you might be nodding your heads like, yeah, no, it doesn't. I can't just will myself to not have enough sugar, because physiologically what's happening is we're taking away a major energy source. And so if we think about protein as being this building block, we need the protein to be the building blocks for repair, for building, making everything on your body. And then carbs and fats are energy sources. So what I see people do is they are pretty good about I need to have my protein, so they'll do, let's say, a chicken breast, and they're I need to do my vegetables, so I'm going to have fiber from my vegetables, so they're going to do a chicken breast and broccoli, right? And they're going to be there's no sugar in this, and I'm not going to have sugar, and I'm going to be so successful this time, and I'm going to have my chicken breast and my broccoli, and I'm so healthy, and this is going to be great. And they have it, and they're starving a couple of hours later, and they're I
had that.
This is not filling. This is not filling. I just can't eat like this. That's what I see a lot. And the biggest mistake is that what they just did was they took away both of their energy sources, because we are so conditioned to be so afraid of healthy fat. And they'll be no, well, I cooked with butter on the pan. Sweetheart, that's not enough fat. I've tried it. I wish it were enough fat. It's not enough fat. Fat is delicious. So what we need to do is really, really, if we are pulling down our carbs, at the same time, we need to be upping those fats big time so that our body has energy to run on. And so we don't want to have high carbs and high fat at the same time. We don't want to do that. So the carbs and the fat should actually oppose each other for the best balance, right? So it's not we can't have any of them, but if we crowd out some of the carbs by focusing primarily on getting a good, honestly, fatty piece of protein, having a ribeye, ground meat, this is going to keep you so much more satiated than you ever thought possible. And really prioritizing protein, getting at least 30 grams as a general rule of thumb at a meal, it will keep you so much more full. It will keep your blood sugar so stable. I always say to my clients, if you are craving snacks at night, you did not eat enough protein that day. So that's just my go-to, always fill up on protein. And if you're not hungry for protein, meaning meat or eggs or fish, you're not actually hungry, right? And so I personally, on my plate, I eat all of my protein first for the most part, because I want to make sure our body has a set point for protein, and it will cause you to feel hungry until you hit that threshold. So if you're sitting there and you're having snack foods, think about snack foods. They're all high, not in protein, but in fat and carbs. Things like cookies, ice cream, popcorn. All of these things are high in energy, but there's nothing satiating about them because they don't have the protein. So protein is your blood sugar's best friend, and having the healthy fats are super, super, super helpful. So getting the avocados, things with coconut, olives, olive oil, meat fats, dairy fat, if you can do dairy, eggs, egg yolks. These are the foods that are going to keep your blood sugar stable and help take you to that next meal. And then just eat your carbs last on the plate. And you might find a lot of people will say, I didn't even want the sweet potato. Like I just had like a bite and like I wasn't even really hungry for it. So your body will naturally feel satiated. And yeah, you can have some carbs at the end and that keeps your blood sugar so much more stable and you're so much more satiated from this deep nourished cellular level that it crowds out the food noise. It quiets the food noise. Yeah.
Makes so much sense. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So that's so eye-opening. And I think a lot of my listeners are going to be like, whoa, that's what I was doing. Why? No wonder I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I can remember doing that too. Be like, oh, I notice it. And sometimes it still happens. And I'm like, oh, that's what I was missing. Was missing all that butter or that good stuff. This has been incredible, Dani. So where can everybody come and connect with you online? Obviously, I'll put all those links below in the show notes, but why don't you let everybody know where they can come and continue learning from you?
Sure. So my podcast is Unlock the Sugar Shackles. You're going to be a guest again soon, too. I can't wait. And my website and my Instagram is Danielle Hamilton Health or DanielleHamiltonHealth.com. I make a lot of content on Instagram to make all this like picturable so you can kind of understand what I'm saying with all these graphs and ups and downs and things. It really makes it make sense when you can visualize it. So come say hello over there.
Amazing. Thank you. Yes, definitely go and check out more of what Dani, I know that, she threw a lot of information at you today and this was really helpful. So save this episode, share it with your friends. This is a big one and something that, like I said, we've never been properly taught and our doctors have never been properly taught. So here we are having to really arm ourselves and empower ourselves with this knowledge. And I hope that everybody listening, you got at least one mind-blowing moment out of this that you can go and do your own research, go and start investigating, get your CGM, start eating more healthy fats, start switching up some things and hopefully, support your health in the long run. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, Dani. I know you have so much more to share. We'll definitely have you back sooner than the last time that we waited.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. And this has been incredible, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.